Is a good thing. All right. The committee will come to order. This is a hearing on the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We are pleased that Secretary Jackson has once again joined us. Pursuant to the rules, we're going to have opening statements of 16 minutes, 8 minutes on each side. The gentleman from Illinois, who is the ranking member of the subcommittee, and I believe the gentleman from Texas, and I will begin with my 5 minutes. Obviously, with the change in majority control, there are going to be some differences in housing policy. Indeed, I think it is in housing policy more than in any other area under this committee's jurisdiction that the last election will have some impact. In particular, many of us believe that the time has come to get the federal government back in the business of either preserving or constructing affordable housing units. The Section 8 program, the voucher program and its various components, does add equity to the housing market. It gives people who don't have enough money to afford decent housing the ability to do so. But with current policy, where it is mostly on a year-by-year basis, what the Section 8 voucher program does is add to the demand for housing in a way that is unlikely to increase the supply, so that we both add equity, but we also have an upward pressure on price. We see this particularly in, for instance, New Orleans, where the physical destruction of so many rental units has caused an especial problem, and that's why when this committee brought out a bill previously, which will go to the floor next week, we talked about trying to start construction of some units, specifically, for example, project-based Section 8s, so that a developer can get a 20-year commitment from us, literally take that to the bank, and begin to build the housing. Simply to provide rental assistance in an area like New Orleans, where so much of the rental housing has been destroyed, does not accomplish what we need to accomplish. New Orleans is obviously the worst case because of the hurricane, but there are other places. So we will, in this coming 2 years, be focusing on what we hope will be sensible housing production. And I want to address one of the great obstacles to housing production, which is cultural lag. If we asked many Americans, including many who serve here, to think about federally funded housing, they would see large, sterile towers with far too many low-income people packed in and too few services. They'd see Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, or Cabrini Green, or Columbia Point. The point we need to make is that we have long since stopped making those mistakes. We also want to be clear, those were never the idea of the poor people who lived in them. That was the idea of society as to how to warehouse them cheaply. We have the capacity, working particularly with private developers, both profit and nonprofit, to have federal help so that housing is constructed in a way that is good for the people who live there and good for the neighborhoods in which we live. And we will be working on that. One initiative of which I am particularly proud, and I know, Mr. Secretary, this is one I think where we would have cooperation. Without any new money being voted, and money is always going to be a problem, members of the staff of this committee are working with members of the staff of the Ways and Means Committee under the supervision of Chairman Rangel, so that the tax-supported housing programs work as seamlessly as possible with the appropriations-based programs. In many parts of the country, such as the one that I represent, the low-income housing tax credit is a good thing, but it does not get the rents low enough given the various costs. If you can have the low-income housing tax credit or housing revenue bonds work closely with Hope 6 when we get that going again, or Hope whatever, with other housing programs, then you get more bang for the buck. And so without in any way increasing appropriations, we can cut down on the transaction costs, lawyers and other fees. We can speed it up, and in housing, of course, time is money. The more quickly you can build, the better off we are. So that's one of the areas where we will be working. One of the areas we want to work on, and I want to say, Mr. Secretary, and I will get to this, many of us are appreciative of your decision regarding Starrett City. You stepped in to prevent the loss of affordable units in New York City when they are needed, and I hope we can work in the future to take the principle you act on there and generalize it. That is, it is difficult, as we all know, to build new affordable housing because people have what I think is often an irrational resistance to it. the importance of preserving those subsidized units that have already been built, as you are doing in Starrett City, is you avoid one of the most serious problems and one of the most serious expenses. Subsidized housing that has already been built, if we can preserve that going forward as subsidized units, not just for the tenants, we avoid all the zoning issues. We avoid all the political battles. We also, of course, it may be cheaper than building from scratch. And therefore, one of the things we want to do, and we look forward to working with you, is let's do an inventory of all the housing that is now under various restrictions, where those restrictions are going to expire. Recognize that the owners have legal rights that we should not try to interfere with, but I believe it is more efficient from a number of areas to go to try to either buy these owners out or provide them incentives so that we preserve the units. Our policy has been to protect the tenants, but then when the tenants moved or died or whatever, we lost the unit. I would like to take the principle on which you quite correctly acted in Starrett City and see if we can nationally, working together, do the maximum to preserve units. I think it will be the least expensive way to do affordable units from another number of categories. Last point is this, and I'm going to have my time, and I'll recognize members on the other side. We think what we can do to prevent future predatory lending, which has caused so much problems. One of the things I will ask you, and I noticed Senator Dodd, to his credit, has announced that he's interested in this, and I think it's one of the areas where he's been taking the lead and deserves credit for it. Are there things we can do for the people who've already been trapped? There may or may not be. I'd like to be able to look at that. Certainly, we know the regulators have been issuing guidance to the banks, urging them to show forbearance where possible, and we're certainly going to be asking Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to the extent that these things are in their portfolio, to show forbearance. But we ought to look at whether or not there's anything we can do for the current victims. We also, of course, will be working together for the future. And next, Chair recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Texas.
Well, I thank the Chair.